The Denver Nuggets are the 2023 NBA champions. And I'll go more in depth on that later, but to introduce the video, was the series boring? Was the finals series boring? Were the Heat not competitive enough? Would it have been better with the Celtics or the Bucks or any other strong team out east? Uh, let's do a deep dive and find out. So, first off, to give props to the champions, the Denver Nuggets have an amazing team from top to bottom. Of course, you have Jokic and Murray, but they're complemented so well with just Swiss Army knife guys that can do just about everything, from shooting to penetrating to passing, just offensively, guys that play their role so well and can do just about everything. So where if you take out a guy and put in someone else, there's not too much of a drop off because that man is still a threat within his own right. Amazing team structure, and something that I see being lauded but not lauded enough is that it was done the right way. Not a super team, of course. Everyone was drafted or traded to the team, and it was just an organic building of, honestly, a perfect team. Seriously, I think this is one of the better teams that I've seen ever. Ever. Now, I haven't been around basketball that long. I'm only 19 years old. But when I sit back and think about all the other previous champions, because of how deep this team is from top to bottom, I'd say they're one of the best constructed teams ever. You have your stars, but you also have key solid role players that can each individually go for maybe their usual 12 to 25 a night. Realistically, if you leave KCP open that long, if you leave KCP open long enough, he'll get 20 on you. Really. If Aaron Gordon has too many defenders on him that are small because of screens from switches, and he'll get 20 on you. And just this team as a whole was constructed perfectly, in my opinion. And congratulations to them. They are the best team. They were the best team in the NBA this year. Congratulations to them. I'm happy for everybody involved. I'm happy for the entire team. Not to take this spotlight away too quickly, but to really focus on the main point of the video that I'm making today. Was the series not competitive enough? I genuinely think that people are underestimating how great the Nuggets really were. It makes sense to make the argument that the series wasn't competitive because of the Heat being an 8th seed, but at the same time, they got there for a reason. They beat everybody that was put in front of them and made it to the finals. Did something that no other team could do in the playoffs, which was win a game in Denver. I think the discussion shouldn't necessarily be, was the series as competitive as it could have been, but just a reflection on the domination and greatness of the Denver Nuggets this year and how complete and whole that team really was. But if we were to dissect the series and see how could it have been more competitive if there were other teams involved, the fair thing would also be to analyze that the other teams that would have been involved, Miami beat for a reason. They had the same chances Miami did, and they did not get there because Miami beat them. Simple as that. So you could sure go down matchups and say, oh, Boston had Robert Williams to throw at Jokic, and then you could either put Tatum or Brown on Jamal Murray and have their length kind of stunt him, and then at that point, put anybody you want on the other guys and just make sure they don't leave or whatever. And it's fun to hypothesize these things, but at the end of the day, we would have got that matchup if they beat Miami. The same for the 76ers. They would have got that matchup had they won their series, and so forth and so on. Had the Bucks won, we would have seen Jokic and Giannis, and then you throw Chris Middleton on Jamal Murray, which, by the way, that plain state of thinking obviously isn't the real nitty gritty of basketball, because how we saw in this series, all it takes is an effective screen. And now your whole defensive plan of putting this guy on this guy is in shambles, basically. Because if you want to fight over the screen and try and get through and not immediately switch, especially the beautiful play from, especially with the dynamic duo of Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. Both of them are a shooting threat. Both of them are an inside threat. So you have to play them as honestly as possible. But it puts you in such a predicament where you have to pick one thing on their pick and roll and choose it wholeheartedly. There is no time for second guessing. If you go under that screen, you're telling Jamal Murray to shoot. If you try and fight over the screen, that's still enough time for him to shoot. And make it a good look as well. So your best option is the switch, right? Which, with the Heat, isn't a bad idea because Bam Adebayo can guard Jamal Murray. There were several possessions this series where Bam guarded Jamal Murray and caused him to miss, or he just hit a tough shot. But I feel like both of them walked away from those possessions saying that they did their best and it could have went the other way, something like that. You know what I'm saying? Both of them felt validated in their games, offensively and defensively. But now you're left with, so first off, let's put a cap on that. There were possessions where Jamal Murray hit tough shots on amazing defense from Bam Adebayo. Nothing you could do about that, right? Then there's the option of, now you have Jokic with a guy that's under 6'5" maybe, when he's already scoring on Bam, who's 6'10", and constantly keeps a hand, wrist, forearm in his face. There's no way he could have saw the basket, that type stuff. What do you do? What do you do? So in those types of situations, to me, it doesn't matter who's on the floor. It doesn't matter if you had Robert Williams in there. Does it really matter if it's Robert Williams or Bam Adebayo? No, Jokic is just Jokic. Does it really matter if it's Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown guarding Jamal Murray? No, because he's just Jamal Murray. That type of thing, right? So I don't think that we should really analyze what teams could have made it more competitive. I think we should just really go in on the Nuggets are just really amazing. Just period, point blank. And give them their flowers because they truly deserve it. Now, as far as people criticizing the Heat, I know there were several role players for the Heat who did not perform in this series. I was slightly disappointed not to see Tyler Hero return for the final game. There were large stakes at hand, of course, so if he were not to perform, every minute is valuable. So you can't just say throw him out there for 5 minutes, see what happens, see what doesn't happen, because those 5 minutes are valuable, especially since it was a close game throughout, right? So one thing that I love about Erik Spoelstra, if something's going right, he's not going to turn away from it unless he's forced to. He doesn't want to experiment with new things and potentially see what could be working better. He understands how great these NBA guys are, and if you have the upper hand, you got to keep it. So he's gonna do that as often as he can. So if his team is winning early on, we're not gonna try and experiment and see, oh, is Tyler really ready? No, we're gonna keep this going. And by the time it got out of hand, it was already basically too late. We were competing, and we just had to see who could win that game. Jimmy did not play particularly well at all. He came alive in the fourth quarter, late in the fourth quarter, but at that time, it was just too little too late. He shot poorly. He defended well, as he does, as Jimmy, but it was especially with all the hype surrounding him about playoff Jimmy, it was slightly disappointing. But I mean, without him, we're not here. You know what I mean? And that's kind of the same sentiment that we had last year with him and that 3-pointer against the Celtics. Without him, we're not here. So you can't really be too mad, but it's just it's disappointing. It's disappointing. But again, even if Jimmy had played well, there were games where Jimmy played well. I forget which one, but Jimmy had like 25. Yeah, but we lost. So, I mean, the Nuggets are just the Nuggets. There's no real. I don't see any team in the league beating them this year. Even if the Nuggets had to face the Warriors this year, they're getting them out of there. And we know that because they swept the team that beat them. You know what I'm saying? So there's no real competition for them this year. No matter who they would have played, I feel like it would have been as quote unquote not competitive as people are saying. I think the competition lies in the challenge that the Denver Nuggets propose for every team that they play, of how good they are, and you have to use the guys that you have to try and offset that. I think that's where the competition lies, not just necessarily this team won more games against said team. I think the competition lies within the games inside of the games. That's where I think the competition is. So I'd love to converse with y'all, see where y'all head is at.